welcome to LitaQuest. I hope everyone's having a great conference so far. I know that I am. Excited to be here continuing the conversation that we started last year at last year's LitaQuest, which was the beginning panel discussion on AI. So I'm very, very excited to continue the conversation. At the last LitaQuest, I was actually one of the esteemed panelists, so very much looking forward to lead the conversation today. Just to start off with some introductions, my name is Sanjay Akut. I formerly was the Chief Technology Officer of a large corporate immigration law firm. We were the first immigration law firm to implement Litify. So I was formerly a client of Litify. I then took that experience and just last year opened my own consulting company, Tukatech, offering fractional CTO services to small businesses and specifically law firms that don't have a full-time CIO, CTO, because I had such a great time doing it the first time. So I thought I'd offer it to other folks. So I'm helping small businesses and law firms with their technology strategy and AI roadmap, and I'm happy to say we've successfully implemented a number of AI solutions at those firms. So very much looking forward to continuing the conversation. And so we'll start off with some introductions.
Everyone, David Schleider with Schulman & Hill. We're a workers' compensation and personal injury firm based in New York City. Been on Litify for almost 5 years now, and really just starting to really explore all the different ways of leveraging AI as much as possible.
Mick Gunter with Daggett Schuler out of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Came out of consumer products distribution, technology operations into the legal world about a decade ago, and led the transformation of Daggett Schuler from Needles to Litify, and now I got to go to a second hand to count all of the things we're using AI in one way or another.
Hi everyone, I am Jessica Lockhart. I'm the Business Intelligence Director at the Jeffcoat firm. We have really been rapidly growing in South Carolina in the personal injury and criminal defense space for several years in a row now, in large part due to the ability to increase efficiencies through our use of Litify and these AI products and some of these amazing technology vendors that we've seen in the exhibit hall.
Great, thanks guys. Really looking forward to the conversation. So, as I mentioned, we're continuing the conversation that we started last year. So we're a little over a year in of really sparking this conversation. So what I wanted to start with was, have your thoughts on the approach to AI changed since last year? Start.
Yeah, I think that this time last year when we were really starting to put our kind of resources into exploring more applications, we were really focused on data extraction from documents, which we just saw a couple examples of, but in just structuring that data as much as possible into our org that we could then use, going from there. We pretty adamantly wanted to stay away from any sort of like generative stuff. That was, I think, just we want to be a little cautious, and you hear the stories of the lawyer who submits a brief and gets caught. So there's just this kind of hesitance. But as we've seen it develop, and you see some of the things that you're able to do, that's now kind of going into the next phase, focusing more on that kind of generative AI.
Yeah, I think a little over a year ago, it was the neighbor's kid that got in trouble for using ChatGPT to write a paper, and it's almost like that's already turned the page. And now we're using AI in marketing, so we are using some generative work and it's more that first draft. It's how do I go from a blank sheet of paper to draft one. Now it almost feels like, I was talking to David Daggett, our founder, and he had done something. He said, I used to think of it as the first draft. Now it's like 95, 96% of the final draft. Mm-hmm. And so whether it's marketing, operational, extracting data, our client interactions now are heavily influenced by AI. And, I think about Agentforce from Salesforce just coming out last October. It's already version 2. And part of what we're doing is sort of waiting and looking to see where is it going before we get into something that might not last.
Right.
Really, for our firm, I would say a year ago we were really in that let's do some data extraction. Maybe we're using a little generative AI, but across the past year we've actually started to look outside of legal, right? And how are other industries, particularly think of like real estate, right? This is a highly competitive industry where SEO, Google rankings, those matter, right? And some of them, they've built robotic process automation that's web crawling their competitors. Well, that's something we can do, right? So the idea is don't confine yourself to the legal space. Look at what other industries are doing, particularly industries that have historically embraced a really tech-forward stance, and figure out how you can change what you're doing entirely to be more efficient and to really be more competitive in a really competitive space.
Yeah, that's interesting. From my perspective, the conversations that I'm having with clients have really been starkly different over just the course of the year that I've been doing this. And it really has gone from exploratory in nature. What is AI? I think, maybe I want to start using it to, now the conversations are very much around, and Mick, you and I were just talking about it, where can we apply it? We need to apply it. Everyone, we're behind the ball. We're not using AI, so let's really get in front of it. And so I find that it's just over the course of a year, which is incredible, just from a technology adoption perspective, and specifically, no offense to the lawyers in the room, legal tech adoption, you guys are slow. You guys don't take things on very quickly, and so it's pretty incredible. Now that said, and you started touching on it, clients have been, rightfully cautious, right? So I want to go, but whoa, I don't want it writing those things for me, and pump the brakes a little bit. So what are, from your guys' perspective, what are the worries that still persist amongst you and your staff in the application of AI? Jessica, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so it's really easy to immediately say, I'm afraid of hallucinations, right? I'm afraid, well, what's going to happen with my data if I input it into this generative AI system? But when I really sit down and talk to our attorneys, our production staff, it's what is the purpose of my job if you're going to automate it? So I think that is part of the issue that we're dealing with, is making people understand that this is meant to improve efficiency, support them to actually upscale, right? Allow your attorneys to focus entirely on strategy development and not, can I, massively review 20,000 pages of medical records. So I think that has been for us the shift that we're needing to make, right? Is help our team understand that this is not meant to replace them, that it's meant to support.
I think there's been a bit of an overwhelm of the number of offerings,
Right.
and different vendors, different things. So I think one of the things that we're spending a lot of time is, how does this fit? We've done a lot of demos, a lot of pilots, and they're sort of informing our decisions. But yeah, I mean, I heard it today. I know, from pins to needles, and we're there for 20 years, and then you're on Litify, and all of a sudden it's like, we got to do this right now. And so it's almost counterintuitive trying to push the legal space forward, but also on a pace where you understand, how does this fit in for the long term? Jessica hit it in terms of staff acclimatization, but with the attorneys too. I think that a lot of attorneys are doers, and so how does this become your bionic power, not the thing that replaces you or obsoletes you?
Right.
Yeah, I think from the client side of things, you hire a law firm, you expect it to be done, the work to be done by a lawyer. I don't think we've run too much into it quite yet, where it's come up as a major issue, but you do need to be mindful that at the end of the day, people expect their lawyer, when they say we're doing legal work, that's the perception in their mind, that it's not some AI program just doing everything. I'm sure we'll have to tackle that more directly at some point, but you just keep that in mind, that it's really a tool for your lawyer to be more effective in your representation, not in lieu of representation.
And do you think that is it different than the other technology tools that we've implemented over the years, where at some point you've gained efficiencies in the practice of law, and so I guess it's just natural that gets kind of built into your billings and all those things, but I guess more dramatically maybe because it's so transformative?
And I think, like anything with clients, it's about communication.
Right.
And if you're communicating effectively with them about if they do have specific questions, you'll explain exactly what was done. You write an appeal, you send a copy to them, and if they start asking, this doesn't look right, you just have to be ready to have that conversation. To touch from the staffing side, it's really just to highlight, this is about taking the most annoying work you have to do away from you. It's not to replace you, it's so that you can actually do things that are worth your time.
Absolutely. And to that point, so we've talked a little bit about just where we've come over a year, We've talked a little bit about some of the risks. Just there's still cautions. People want to move fast, but pump the brakes a little bit. Let's do things the right way. So now, and we've touched on it. Mick, you've touched on all the different solutions that are out there, and maybe so. Where have each of you gone? What are you doing with AI in your firm right now that you're actually seeing impact?
Gosh, so some of the folks that are here, Case Status, we've put a ton of effort into their platform for the recommended, and to that end, I think it takes our most inexperienced legal assistant and makes them above average because they're staring at that cursor, they're staring at that question. I don't know how to answer the client's question, but it gives them the potential responses. We've molded and shaped those over time so they really have the Daggett Schuler voice. We're using it in our marketing. We're doing a good bit of gathering data and parsing data in different ways across the web, across our competitors. We've done demos in demand writing. We've done some of those things. We're using a good bit on the litigation side of gathering and parsing data, creating summarizations for our attorneys, cautiously dipping our toe into sandboxing documents and data to then do some of the generative AI with, generative querying of data with. So that's a good handful of things that we actually have in place today.
Great. Jessica?
Yeah, so we have really looked at a few buckets in our firm. So marketing is key, right? So sort of what I referenced earlier, we use a web crawler, RPA, that goes across all of our competitor firms, and it's identifying what is Google ranking highly and tells us what kind of content we need to be generating, what type of voice we should be using. We've built some custom models that actually have taken all of our marketing materials so that if Michael needs to, our CEO needs to do a 20-second radio ad, we, run it in the model. He gets really a decent script to be able to go live on that. We also have done a lot to help our legal production staff, so demand drafting, automatic uploading and identification of documents into Litify, all of the AI beta testing. It has really proven to be beneficial for our team and allowed us to really scale the operations of that group without adding additional staff. And we're working now really on how do you use it for case strategy, right? So we're building models to identify, as we put information into our system, what's the chance this person has a TBI that we haven't recognized yet? So that really every way it's been transformative for our firm across the past few years.
Yeah, like I kind of mentioned, our approach really started as just get information from documents into the system, get the data, scrape what we need. We started with, I think our first application would have been with Foundation AI, big supporters of them, really like their product. And it was just for one single use. It was to get our hearing notices and our workers' comp practice. We were calendaring them manually into Outlook, not even putting them directly into Litify, which opened up all other sorts of issues we had to deal with. And it was just get the hearing notice, put it into their system, and give me the hearing information, and then, calendaring it automatically. But then we started to kind of go the next step with that same idea of give me the structured data, but let's get more information. So instead of just giving me the date of the hearing, what's the purpose of the hearing? Read the entire notice and, tell me what type of hearing. Is it for a settlement? Is it for a trial, whatever it might be? And then going even further, we're just finishing testing this. All of our workers' comp board mail, it's unique because we get it digitally, and it has not only the claim number in the title of the document that we get digitally, it has like an identifier of the document. So it's just tailor-made for this extraction tool to identify for this type of document, I care about XYZ things, and then we map that to our matter fields that then trigger tasks for paralegals, updates to the matter plan that then update the clients via case status, so you kind of have this ecosystem of automation. AI is the fun new tool, but you have a lot of just good automation tools native to Salesforce. So don't forget about those. Utilize those as much as possible. Sorry. Utilize those as much as possible as well. In addition, the next thing we've really just kind of started with, and I have to read this because I don't really understand exactly how it works, we're using an AWS and IBM cloud tool to extract and analyze medical documents using a large language model with retrieval augmented generation. Again, I only understand a little bit of that.
It sounds really cool.
A big thank you to Dennis Allen, our VP of product. He was a big part of kind of pushing this. And really what it is it's a tool. We looked at a couple vendors, but our workflow was so specific with medical treatment, specifically MRI, diagnostic testing, procedures, operative reports, provider records, where we had a lot of that information already in treatment records in Litify. So we didn't need a central repository that we're extracting and matching. We needed something just direct in Docrio. We have the documents there, pull the data. So we built a custom tool, really in the line of extraction. What were the complaints to the doctor? What were the impressions on finding? But what we've seen is it's also able to analyze it pretty well and count findings. Tell me how many tears there are on the MRI. Give me a brief synopsis of everything that the doctor's recommending in terms of treatment. It surprised even me how much it really is able to do. Of course, there's a concern that it might make mistakes, but humans make mistakes. So you just kind of have to QC it and come up with a process to make sure you're being as tight as possible with it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And with any technology adoption, we kind of always get to the point where when you guys are making decisions, and you've each touched on it a little bit, which is it's the build versus buy. There is a large number of vendors, and they all have great products and all those things, but when is your solution needing to be custom? When do you make that decision? So just a little bit about how you guys have navigated through that. David, I think you just started talking about it. I mean, there was a reason that you needed to go custom there.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to what the output at the end of the day, what are you looking for? And when you start the analysis, try and give a really defined problem that you're solving. Yes, there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with AI features and products, but what is the actual problem you're trying to solve? So this extraction tool, as cool as it is, some of the analysis we're able to do, and we're now going to continue to explore, the problem we were trying to solve is that we have a New York employee on a New York salary sitting for a large part of the day, copy and pasting pieces of medical records into Litify. So it just seemed like such an easy solve for us with this application. Whereas, as we look now, okay, what's the best way for the analysis? There's some very good products out there. One thing for us is always the information has to come back into Salesforce. That's sort of a non-starter for us, but not all, every firm's going to have their requirements, and I think the best advice is just to go through the full analysis. What's it going to cost to build? What's it going to cost to buy? What's the problem we're solving? And, just understand there's risk. So, credit also to Alex Schulman, who with me and Dennis is very clear. He says, let's be aggressive. I don't care if there's risk in it not working. Let's try it. Worst case, we'll get it again on the next one. So credit to him as well.
Yeah, I think, one of the challenges of developing your own software is then you're a software company, and you own all of the maintenance tail. And if you, and I think that's one of the risks and challenges up front is you think about, okay, I'm going to build it and it's going to cost X, and then you don't think about the tail. You don't think about maintaining it over time. So we we're a small shop. I am the IT strategist and the implementer often. So, another use of that is I'm not a good developer, but I've become a much better developer using Gemini or using ChatGPT and other tools that can be really helpful. So I think what we're really trying to do is when possible buy, but it has to be on the Salesforce platform. It has to dovetail with the suite that we already have, and it has to solve a problem. I heard some folks talking about their referral networks and referring out small cases. We're a small firm. We don't have enough to refer out to really sustain a referral network. So we went through an exercise of how do we analyze the small cases and make them profitable. And to your point, David, the medical record summary was a significant part of the human labor involved, and so we were able to leverage that into a graphical output and a brief summary of the medical records specifically for the lower end cases where they're less complex. There's not as much there. The negotiations aren't going to be as complex. Take that time out and then coach the legal assistant to spend that time being creative and digging in with relationship with the client to make sure they're doing the things we need them to do so that that case comes together, which has worked out really well for us.
Mick, do you have any would you say that you have any custom solutions at your firm, or mostly off the shelf?
Mostly off the shelf are things we've been able to build straight within Litify.
Yep,
So,
right.
Flows, or we've got a little bit of, there's one tiny thing we're building. It's still a toy, though,
Okay.
that I'm building on the side, but most of it is off.
Fun, isn't it?
It is fun.
Jessica.
Yeah, so we really similar to what these guys are doing. We're looking for a solution that hopefully integrates with Litify. If it's a generic enough problem, right, that's common to the industry, we're going to go try and source an out-of-the-box solution. We have had some really hyper-specific situations come up. So, for example, we have a criminal defense practice that operates in 3 very specific markets in South Carolina with a very specific fee structure. So we built essentially an AI coach to help our intake team know how to sell those cases, right? That's not really something that exists out of the box because it's so hyper-specific to our experience. So for us, it's, yes, let's go try to find an out-of-the-box solution. If we know that it's going to be too specific to us, then we're going to undertake the task of doing it.
What did you build that coach? What platform did you use?
Yeah, so we actually originally built it as a custom GPT, and then we actually ended up partnering with a company that works with call centers
Okay, yeah.
to help build it on a larger scale. So, yeah, again, to the reference of go outside of legal because there's some cool stuff out there.
Yeah.
That's actually been really the reason we're able to do what we're able to do.
Sure. Yeah, in my experience in talking to a number of clients over the last year or so, and I'm a technologist, I'm a developer by trade, so I would love writing code, but I always say, I think it's buy if it works for you. Why you're not a software shop. Your maintenance is a real thing, support is a real thing. And so I always lean towards there. But I've had clients that have been adamant on call number 1 that, oh, no, nothing out of the box will work for us. We're special, so let's build some custom. And have had success in building, medical record summaries for them. And specifically, there was a firm in like one state, one county accident reports, and it's like they're formatted in a certain way. So train a model, a custom model, and extracting all the information from that. So yeah, it's just really interesting to me, even on the business side of the firm, how they're thinking about it. So for folks in the room who are still in the early days, so this is still pretty early. I know we've come a long way in a year, but change management comes into this, right? So we have people that are scared a little bit. Just always the adoption of technology is a little bit slow in our industry. So just really want to talk about how you guys are navigating kind of the change management piece within your firm as you're rolling out these new and innovative products and processes. Jessica, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so really a key here is this a message coming from your ownership down, right? So one of the things that we have is a core value that we are innovative, ever improving. And that means every single person who walks in the door to our firm needs to buy into this idea that we're innovative and ever improving. And that means new technologies are going to come on board. Processes are going to change as we have, new AI products that come out, new technology products that come out, and it's just an expectation of every employee that we hire and onboard that they're going to buy into this innovation culture. And it's a lot of communication around, like I said earlier, we're going to automate things that help you. It's not to replace you.
I think we spend a lot of time talking about empathy and creativity. And if it doesn't involve one of those 2 aspects, it's up for grabs. That is where we want our people focusing, is being creative and using their empathy and people skills with our clients and with each other in a way that generates the best result for our clients. And then we pair that with any time we automate something away, we backfill it with what they're going to do. And there's been a pretty steady drumbeat from the time we started moving down the road of Litify of, there's those good rule of thumb benchmarks. A legal assistant can handle 75, 85, 185 cases, and it depends on, well, what does that entail? And so we've sort of been sprinkling in over time that case count's going to go up. That doesn't mean you're working harder. It doesn't mean you're doing more. Um, and keep circling it back to empathy and creativity.
Yeah, I think if you release some sort of new AI feature, or any feature really, and the staff level employees are not the most excited about it, then what problem did you really solve? Because, you know, if they're not excited, then you probably didn't solve anything for them. And maybe it's not worth doing. And we haven't seen any pushback, because I think it ultimately comes down to all we're doing is making your job easier. Yes, this might prevent us from having to hire more in the future, but it's really not looking at, oh, we want to trim the workforce by X%. It's let's just maximize what we're able to handle and the results that we're able to deliver ultimately for the clients, because that's what this is all for.
Sure. Now, you used the word excitement. Do you guys have is it like a specific effort to get your folks excited about these things? You know, does it just come naturally because you are helping them in
That's
their
the
job?
hope,
You're
right?
removing
Should just
rote,
come natural.
you know, but so I've seen firms that have implemented like the evangelist type of idea, the technology champions, whatever you want to call it, the folks on the ground that are meant to help to get people excited. Have you guys seen any of that in your firms?
Not really us, no.
Most of my folks don't get excited about technology.
All right.
It's like the kid being dragged to eat their vegetables.
Sure.
But we do, and to the converse of that, we've had a fair amount of turnover. People who you know, they had done their job in Needles forever and they got dragged into Litify, and now this is, some of them have had change exhaustion, and they've chosen to go elsewhere. And I think, to Justin's point, that's something that as we hire new folks, we make sure, hey, things always change. Whereas I think there had been, you know, Daggett Schuler was on pens. I think David was proud to be one of the first 10 customers of pens. And Needles was relatively unchanged for at least a decade. So stability was valued over change. And so that's been a journey. So I don't know that the evangelist part, but there's definitely a cultural shift to at least acknowledging that change will happen and then giving people a voice. Sometimes sometimes people just have to vent and complain.
Sure.
And we don't bark back at that. We let that happen and just make sure that's part of the expression of creativity, not being negative.
Right.
So I want to share an example that I think is something that will hopefully be helpful as a process for you guys as you try and implement a new technology. So we looked to build what I would call a super intake team, right? We know we have all of these individuals. They actually all work remote for us. All of them have different strengths. So what we decided is, why can't we just figure out what all of their strengths are and essentially build a script that helps everyone, right? So we met with our intake team and we were like, we know you guys are awesome. Now we want to share your knowledge with your other team members, right? And so we got them bought into this idea that they were building the model, right? Their excellent work was the reason we could create what I call the super intake. So now we have a live coach that sits with them in their ear on Zoom and kind of helps recommend the next thing to say on the intake call. And they were excited because they know that they're the source of that initial build, right? They know their excellent work was recognized to the point that we wanted to invest money into it. So I think it does help to like really make your team aware that the reason you're investing in them is because they're excellent, right? You're not trying to automate them away, but they've actually allowed you to move into a space where we can, you know, like I said, create the super intake.
Sure. Yeah, I think the messaging, in my experience, it's just, yes, you're not automating them away. Don't you hate those rote tasks that you're doing all day long, and kind of selling it from that perspective, and typically people will buy in. I mean, at the end of the day, like you said, David, it does enable you, if you do it correctly, to not hire, you know, as many folks. So there is like a reduction there, but, you know, Mick, you said it. You're not just slicing people, letting them go right away. We implemented something, thank you for your service, kind of repurposing folks, letting them, I always say letting folks use their brain, you know, a little bit. That's what you hired them for.
Yeah, and it's interesting, I think about, you know, so we are basically flat head count to when we transition to Litify. Our fees are up about 25%. So that's great. In our Social Security practice in particularly, it's interesting, we have two outstanding folks that really understand how to get the attorneys ready for that hearing, ready to do the the appeals work, but there was a lot of client interaction that was hard. And it was prior, everybody had their own little caseload and everything was siloed, and there was no standardization. And we created some standardization, and now we've made some of it so rote and repetitive we have a hard time maintaining staff. And so now we're working on how much of that can we automate away. And so standardizing, automating, and giving that creativity to folks. But and they get excited. I've got, they've got, the Matter owner, they have between 700 and 800 cases at any given time. And 3 years ago, when I sort of threw, hey, it might be over 500, their heads exploded. And now they're like, look at me, I've got 850, I'm killing it.
Right.
So that is just fun to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the firm that I was with over the course of the time, we saw that we were able to double the amount of work. So work volume doubled with about a 20% increase in staff at the time. And so it's very, very exciting to see, and that's exactly what you want to get out of these types of implementations. So we're going to, on this topic of automation and all of those things, everybody out there now is talking about the next thing is agents. AI agents. They're the next big thing. They're these autonomous workers. Personally, I think the term is being used a little bit too much. It's being used to describe things that are really just workflows with AI sprinkled in, probably. But really just the use of agents. Are you guys exploring it? Have you seen any use cases where you're really looking to dive in? Agentforce is something. So, David, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, to be honest, not so much yet.
Yeah.
It's something very much on Dennis's radar, but it's something that I'm kind of saying I'll see how it all fleshes out.
Sure.
I'm humble enough to say I have no idea where this is going, and I'm just going to let the people that do and the smarter people than me figure it out, and then we'll make some decisions on it as it all develops.
Yeah, I think when I was looking that up, that Agentforce launched October 2024, and it's already on version 2.
Right.
Software sucks until version 3. So so I think to somebody, yeah, good. We've got ideas, we're thinking about things, but that's one that we're sort of holding and waiting to see how it evolves. But the stuff in Trailer, the way you can go from the old, you've got to if then everything out, to where now it can sort of guess
Yes.
on its own,
Yes.
is exciting and enticing. But again, this is the legal space. We don't have to be on the bleeding edge of technology to win, and so I think that's where looking with excitement, but haven't taken any action yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I think for us, the immediate use case I see is to help with some initial intake stuff, right? Like we get a lot of website chats, form submissions, things that can kind of help us. And that agent space is like the immediate response. I think across the next year, though, the way Agentforce and really agentic AI is used is going to dramatically change most professional services. And so I think we're kind of playing around with what that's going to look like for us.
Yeah, voice agents, you're messing around with it at your call center. That's a big topic out there. It's just these voice agents. It's would you even feel comfortable with an AI agent answering the phone for you? What are your thoughts on that?
No less comfortable than a brand new intake coordinator
Okay.
answering the phone,
Yeah.
right? If you see it and it seems reliable.
Yeah.
But again, it might be a little bit until we're there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see no reason not to.
And we're off script now, guys. So buckle up, okay? So, but would you think that you would let folks know that they're talking to an AI agent? Like, hi, I'm Sanjay, your AI agent. Or just, I'm Bill, and I'm here to help you. Wondering what your thoughts are.
I got a text message from the hotel that said, hi, I'm Dolores. I'm here to be your person. I know there is not a human being named Dolores.
I met Dolores, and she's delightful.
Oh! So I don't know, but that's something that I'm intrigued with is, a lot of our phone calls and a lot of people, have moved their call centers, south of here or on the other side of the world. And I mean, we've got a job opening right now for a bilingual workers' comp person that we really need translation. So we're looking at, could we use an agent to do the translation? Looking at, for a lot of the call-in type things, could we do that and then train it to escalate? The old help
Yes.
desk. Let me escalate you to level
Yep.
2, where the level 2 is a human.
Yep.
But I think that's part of the soul searching we're going to have to do is do we announce that that's not a person?
Yes.
And I think that's part of how does the rest of the world evolve?
Yeah.
I remember when it was really cool. I think it was an Audi I had that I called and it came up and they answered, "Hello, Mr. Gunter," and it was human. It's been quite a while ago, but I was so impressed they knew my phone number, wherever they knew what kind of car I had. It's like that was the pinnacle of customer service. So I think the way the rest of the customer service world evolves, if it can go away from, the ad nauseum press 1, press 2, the obvious nasty chatbots,
Yes.
to it sounds like a human, it feels like a human, it knows who we are. I think the rest of the world will dictate our behavior to some degree.
Yeah, and we might be forced to say regulatory thing, that might come down the pike that you have to announce that it's an AI that you're talking to. So yeah, it's very exciting. My piece on the agent thing is that that is one that I think it's okay to not be an early adopter or bleeding edge person, but sprinkling AI into your workflows to make them a little bit more intelligent and build a number of those, and it might just become natural that an agent sits on top of all those workflows and essentially makes the decision of which workflow to go with. But you have to start there. I mean, it's one of the things that I love about talking about AI here at the LittleQuest, which is you can't even get started with AI unless you have good data and kind of a single repository and all those things, which is what kind of building on top of a platform like Litify and Salesforce really helps with. And then all the automations and things like that. So we are, I'm not sure how much time left, about 12 minutes. We're way ahead of schedule here, guys. So how about just any advice for folks on what would be your advice, David, as you've gone down this journey? And you're a panelist up here. What would you tell folks to do to kind of get started?
Yeah, I think if it seems like where do you begin, just start with one thing. Take one thing that is really annoying. Go ask your receptionist, go ask your legal assistants, go ask your paralegals, what's one thing that's really annoying to do that you do a lot? And, talk with them about it, see if you can write it down into steps, and then, again, there's a lot of vendors, and the costs usually work. They usually work for, every firm's different, and obviously volume is going to dictate some of that stuff, but it's worth exploring. Start with one problem, and then just work your way up from there.
It's great advice. Nick?
I think, one of the great things about Litify is it's built on Salesforce. And Salesforce is an incredible platform. Mark and his team spent a lot of money on R&D. I think it is very worth it to listen to what is Salesforce doing with their platform. And then, Jessica mentioned going outside of legal. I think like 490 of the Fortune 500 use Salesforce in some way, shape, or form. It is a great place to explore the art of the possible. And I think don't be limited by your experience or expectation. Go explore what the art of the possible is, and then come back around to what Daniel said is what are those annoying things that we don't have a good solution for.
Yeah, so really two things. The first is really sit down with your team and understand the pain points. Don't start the conversation with what can technology do to help you. Have them list out their problems, what are they spending time on, and then you can go source solutions, right? That's really how we started, is that we had our intake team say, we are having the hardest time closing on the first call because we always get this objection. We're like, well, you know what? One of our intake people is excellent at closing on the first call, so we're going to create something that helps you replicate the behavior that they have, right? And then the other thing is really in this space be ready for revolutionary change, right? We're talking about really early agentic AI and we're kind of tiptoeing around it, but in a year we're probably all going to be using it in some capacity. For the lawyers in the rooms, you might not like this, but at some point it's probably going to negotiate your pre-lit files for you with probably an agent on the other side for the insurance company.
Don't throw anything.
So,
Don't throw anything.
Don't throw anything. But be ready for the change to come.
I said these words on this stage at the last LoTuQuest, which was the generative AI it's the next transformative technology thing that we've been a part of. In my lifetime, it was the internet was the first thing, that changed the entire world. Mobile, the iPhones have only been on our pockets for 20 years or so, but I mean, absolutely changed everything. And now it's generative AI. And my advice was, don't be the person clinging to their BlackBerry saying, no, 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 this is never, it's going to come back around to the BlackBerry, so embrace it as much as we can. I'm not really sure what else to, yeah, any last words for the audience here as we end our session?
Just give it a try,
Yeah.
just try something.
That is something.
Worst case, you fail.
I'll build on
you
that.
Do something else.
Experimentation, guys, like safely. We talked about risks. Don't just log on to ChatGPT, public ChatGPT, and start uploading client docs. Please don't do that. But some kind of experimentation. Talk to the folks. Talk to the tech folks at your firm about how you might get a good, secure environment, and just start messing with it. That's what we kind of just let attorneys loose and paralegals loose and admins loose inside of a secure environment, and then they found the stuff, right? They came in and said, hey, I uploaded this and it did this. In the immigration space, it started being able to draft letters that were 85% of the way there, And so let your folks just start playing around with it. They'll come up with great ideas, and then you can see how you can operationalize that. Mick?
One thing that I've had good success with is, as attorneys in your communities and owners and leaders of law firms, you do a lot outside of work. And, one of the things I encouraged was take something that's not here. One of our attorneys is on, bless his soul, he's the president of his homeowners association. And because he's the lawyer, he needed a draft. It had to do with, they were putting cameras up in the neighborhood and how to do it. And I said, and he was like, I got to draft this thing. So why don't you get Ed? So I just sort of showed him how to do it. And so he was able to go use, I can't remember if it was Gemini or ChatGPT, but use one of the local publics. And we just went back and forth in about 20 minutes. He was like, oh my God, that would have taken me hours to source. And was impressed to see how it was coming back with, different laws or different rules or different best practices that, the internet knows that we don't know. And so I think outside of just your firm or just outside your job. Think of places where you can go play in the public sandbox without a moral, ethical, or confidentiality concern to just see what it can do.
Yeah, and really what I said earlier, talk to people outside of legal. Figure out how their firms are doing it. Like I said, talk to some real estate groups. Talk to some restaurant owners, right? They know what it's like to be in a competitive space, and they're going to have excellent ideas about how to improve your marketing, how to get people to look at your website, right? That was an entirely revolutionary change for our marketing team. So just think outside the box. Don't feel confined to one group of people. Reach out to another group that you feel like is in a similarly competitive industry. They do similar tasks to you. They probably have some cool ideas that can help you too.
Awesome. Big round of applause for our panelists here. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you all so much, and hope to talk to you next year about some more AI stuff, okay?